Do you have a plugin almost ready for users but would like more automated end-to-end testing before releasing it? In this video, you will learn how to author functional tests which allow you to test your plugin end-to-end using actual Gradle projects. Functional tests use Gradle's TestKit to launch real Gradle builds in a temporary directory which contains a dummy project with a settings and build file. In the documentation, you can search for TestKit and click on the top result. Here, you can read more about TestKit. There's also a sample functional test that you can reference. Gradle init also creates a sample functional test that we can use as a starting point. The functional test Gradle init creates can be found under Source, Functional Tests, Kotlin, and then the package. Each functional test gets a new temporary directory created for it called projectdir. In projectdir, we create the build and settings files. Then, in each functional test, we define the contents of the build and setting files. That way, we can set up different scenarios with varying contents in the build and setting files for our plugin that we are testing. Then, using the Gradle runner from Gradle TestKit, you can execute a task in the temporary directory, projectdir. The Gradle runner executes the task, producing a console log and generating any associated task outputs. You can then write assertions for the console log, or even the contents of the projectdir if the task created any output files. The sample functional test runs the greeting task. Instead, we want to run the lock coverage gains task. In our consumer project, let's consider the scenario when the coverage file content was 40%. The sources and tests were updated, so the coverage should now be 60%. When the task is run in the consumer project, this is the output. You can see the coverage increased from 40% recorded in the file to 60%. The goal was 55%, so the file is updated with this content. So when we run the lock coverage gains task in the functional test, we'd want to verify the output contains the same message. And also verify the contents of the coverage file. There is no coverage file available right now, so there are a few things we need to do in addition to setting up the build and settings file. We can add a variable for the coverage file. We will need files for the sources and tests as well. I'll just go ahead and copy this. Source file and test file. And this would be under source main java app.java, because that's what it is over here. Source main java. We'll forget the package. We'll just say app.java. And similarly over here, it will be source test java app test.java. source test Java app test.java. Before each test is run, we want the parent directories for the sources and tests to be created. So we can add a before each, and then we set up the directories in here. So we can say source file dot parent file dot make directories, and then test file dot parent file dot make directories. This ensures that source main Java and source test Java are created inside project_dir. In this test here now, we can put the contents of the source file, which we can get from the consumer project here. And we paste that over here. And the contents of the test file, which we can again get from the consumer project. The contents of the coverage file will be 40% initially, so 0.4. So we can also write that over here. The coverage file contents should be initially 0.4. We can copy the contents of the build file from the consumer project. And paste them here. We can go ahead and indent this just to make it look a little cleaner. There we go. We'll actually bring this down as well. Now our consumer project build format was Kotlin, so we need to rename the build file as well over here. To be consistent, let's also rename the settings file. However, we won't need any contents for the settings file over here. We can trim the contents of the build file. We can remove things that are not needed, like the Java toolchain. You'll notice that we reference the version catalog over here. So we'll need that file as well. We'll create it up here. Catalog file. And this will be under gradle.libs.version.toml. Gradle libs.versions.toml. And once again, we want to make the parent directory. Now the contents of the version catalog will be the same for each test, so we can put the contents in the before each itself. We can get the content from here. And we'll paste it over here. And let's indent it. Now that we have the coverage file, we can also assert the contents. After the task runs, it should be 55% because our goal was 55%, and we know that it'll get up to 60% with the additional tests that have been added. So we can say assert equals, and it'll be 0.55 for the contents of the coverage file. We can run the functional test from the editor and see it passes. We can also look at the console output that was generated. To be sure things are set up correctly, we can change one of the assertions. Let's change this one to expect 54% and rerun the test. And we can see it fails. That verifies that things were set up correctly. We can change this back, rerun, and it should pass now. We can also run the functional test through the command line. It will be the functional test task. You can add more functional tests, each with different scenarios to verify the behavior of your plugin before sharing it with others. Each scenario could have different build file contents or different sources, different tests, or other configuration differences. In the next chapter, we will go over how you can publish your plugin.